All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. I know, sorry that the show got postponed a couple times, but I think we finally landed on a good time. So the YouTube signal will be going out, and then people will start jumping on because it takes like 3 or 4 minutes, and then you get that notice. I subscribe to a lot of stuff that I never get the notice for, and I'm like, man, I missed it, or if it was alive, but it's like so random the ones that actually show up. But I've been really looking forward to this, and the reason for this show is that somebody has a new book that is coming out on Amazon, and our guest is Chris Williamson, the author of said book. And you might know Chris, of course, from the Vanished Podcast and Amelia Earhart stuff, Vanishing Earhart. And I'll let Chris talk about this great book that's now available for pre-order. And I like to mention this at the beginning of the show because it's just a thing with YouTube and shows that we might have more people here at the beginning. So I want to remind everybody that the link to pre-order this book is down in the description of this video. So you definitely want to get it, and you want the Kindle version because it's only 99 cents right now. So, hey, buy 2, buy 3, and you definitely want a paperback too because this book is laid out beautifully. I've seen it, but I will let our guest talk about this book a little more, and starting with the title.
Well, listen, thank you for allowing me to be here. This is something we've been doing for, a while now. It's been a long time coming. The book is called Take the Money and Run, The Vanishing of D.B. Cooper. And it is out, as you said, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's the fantastic cover from Dead Street Productions and Joshua and Jamie Sloan, who did a fantastic job on that cover. It just feels a little different. It feels kind of like a heist book. They really did a great job with that. And as you can see, the foreword is by Darren Schaefer, who has become a very good friend of mine. And it's been a long time. You've been privy to the back end of this thing for quite some time now. And we've been working on this aggressively and quietly. Very different than the first book I did on Earhart. And this sort of just got sprung up. And it came really quick. So yeah, that's the book. It's out out for pre-order now, and it'll be out 1 year to the day that we recorded the original show, and 51 years to the night that D.B. Cooper stepped into history. So it's an exciting time right now. And as you can probably imagine, it always gets interesting around the anniversary, as anniversaries tend to do for these historical mystery cases.
And you're a big anniversary guy. You are a big anniversary guy. I always love having you, man. You're a good friend. And it's like we're in a band together, man, making music. That's how I look at it. Because we think alike and like a lot of the same stuff. And you're an artist. I mean, the podcast is so great, which is what the book is. The book is a transcript of the podcast, of course. That was about D.B. Cooper, which was on Vanished, your podcast that you have. And there's the graphic of that, which was just so great. I know you kind of did it in a short amount of time. And unfortunately, Jen Taylor, your co-host, couldn't join for this one.
Right.
But it still came together. It was just fantastic. All the guests you had on it was the way you put it together it's just a great piece of work altogether.
Oh, well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Yes, it is. Just to get out front, it is a written transcript of that original show. However, there is a lot of extra added stuff in the book that is not in that original show, including, probably the coolest, maybe most bone-chilling prologue I've ever read, written by Bruce Smith, who is, as everybody knows here, is, the icon of Cooperville, the mayor of Cooperville. And we have a lot of really great guests in the book, including yourself, Eric Eulis, Mark Zaid, Angel Mays, Javier Leyva, Darren Schaefer. It's probably about a dozen or so people. Dave Futterman's another one. Tessa D'Amico's there. We have a really good mixture of Tom Kay. Gosh, don't forget Tom Kay. Lot of giants. Yeah, giants in the case. A lot of in addition to a lot of fresh faces, and it's really just my journey in and out of the vortex, so to speak. And there's a lot of new material. 1 year retrospectives written by yourself and a couple of the other guests, prologues, forwards, afterwards. So there's a lot of sort of, boned up material in addition to that original show. So if podcasts are not your thing, you don't like to listen to audio and you want to hold something tangible and read it, of course, or go through an audiobook, things of that nature. There are no hardcovers, paperback and Kindle. I'm just looking at sort of what's on the screen here, but yeah, it's out there in a couple of weeks, just in time for CooperCon and for the anniversary and all that jazz. So we're excited. It's a work of labor of love, really, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, the layout is great, and like you said, there's so much more in the book.
Yeah.
I'm not doing an update to my book. It will be in this book, by the way, because people have asked me if I'm doing an update to my book. I just put it all in this one because it was so much more convenient. You had to do all the work. So I put a lot of my follow-up pieces are in this book, but it's all things DB Cooper, like all those great guests that you mentioned. Just some great names. I mean, giants, newcomers, everybody that participated in this great podcast. And then the book, what you have is just these great layouts, like you were talking about the piece that Bruce wrote, which is just fantastic.
Oh man, it's bone chilling. It's bone chilling on page 1.
It's a gem. It's a gem. And you may have heard that Bruce is retiring as the mayor of Cooperville. And I wanted to talk about that now a little bit, and just what Bruce Smith means to all things DB Cooper.
Right.
I can't imagine a world without Bruce Smith in it, because this guy is just such a character. He's brought so much to the case. And
there he
how
is.
Bruce got started. Yeah, there he is. I mean, Bruce, I can't even put into words how he's been with me. I asked if early on when I was writing my book, if I could borrow some of his stuff and interviews he had, like with Jim Hetrick, and he was so open about it. Yeah, Drew, just mention my book. So I've always been good about that. So there's of course a copy of Bruce's book, which most people here probably already have that, because we call it the Bible of the DB Cooper case. But Bruce is huge, and I love that. I love what that piece for this book, and you got it. I mean, just to have that printed is worth this book. I mean, and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, for the record. I didn't know that Bruce was stepping away and retiring, and Godspeed to Bruce. I hope he has a fantastic retirement. I don't think he'll probably not ever step truly out of the vortex, but to step away from it, and really at the stature of who he is, and where he's at and what he's done is remarkable. And to have him, he literally bookends this whole thing. He bookends this presentation. He begins it and he ends it. And it's really great to sort of have him step in and just, perform a nice little cameo in the book. And it really gives, it's an honor for me to have him take part of it, because he doesn't know who I am. I'm a nobody to him. And for him to say, hey, I'll do it, is really, truly an honorable thing for me. And so just like everybody else that's in this book, we have a fantastic, I call it a cast. We have a fantastic cast of people in this book that, stand up and support everything that we're doing. Maybe not the back half of the book. You and I will get started talking about that in a little bit, and sort of who we present. I don't think it's going to be any surprise if people know who, know your work and know what you do and who you champion. But it's a real, it's a real thrill and an honor for me. And this is my second book in, 4 months. So it really is, it's been a lot of work, but it's been something that we've been working on for a long time. And it's really nice to see it come to fruition. And it's nice to finally get to this point where we can promote it. Now the fun stuff is here. It's all hard work until, you get a couple of really precious weeks where you can promote the book and just talk about it and have fun. And this is the kickoff of that. This is the first one. So yeah, man,
this is the funnest part, and it's great. But one of the things that's always been so awesome about you is like what you did with Earhart. You bring in this whole team, and you're just so good about it. Like, there might be this guy over here that doesn't really like this guy over here. They have different opinions on what happened to Billy Earhart or now Cooper, and you can bring the whole crew together. You have that approachability, and you're able to contact people that just, I don't know how you do it, man. It's just great.
Yeah.
How you get these people to respond to you is just awesome.
Yeah. Well, it has a lot to do with one, just asking and just saying, hey, this is the area that we're approaching from. We certainly got some people that were a little standoffish once they determined, who we were sort of pushing in the back half of this book. But when you really think about it, this book doesn't just push one person. We get pretty aggressive on the back end, but we also, before we even mention that person's name, it basically it pushes 8 or 10 other potential suspects, names you obviously know, people in the vortex will know. And Darren Schaefer, shout out to him, does a fantastic job
Great.
in this
I
book.
re-listened to it today. I re-listened to the
Yeah.
podcast today, and Darren's part was
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Such a great breakdown of all those guys.
Amazing. And it's short, it's tight, but it's enough information to whet people's appetite. It's a breezy read. You can sit down and read this and knock this out in 1 or 2 sittings. I know that because I've had some of the beta readers that tested this book and help edit did just that. And the feedback I got was that, yeah, it really consumes, pretty well. And it's a breezy read compared to the Earhart book, which is 800 plus pages. That's a book you have to sit down and invest time in, and rightfully so. And of course, there's, you could do a Cooper book with 800 pages with no problem. But this one I wanted to approach in a little bit of a different format and kind of make this a little more attractive visually and stuff. And I think we were successful in that. I'm excited for people to get the first, especially the soft covers, and actually hold this thing in their hands and read through it. And I'm excited for the feedback. It's going to be great.
Yeah, man, it's great. And I mean, I know some people kind of know the story of how we came together, and that was through Darren Schaefer. I went to my editor that always read the Mountain News, and I just can't imagine the Mountain News not being around anymore because Bruce is such a great writer. But that's where editor found out about the Cooper Vortex. Like, there's this all DB Cooper podcast coming out. I'm like, really? Where's that been all my life, right? And it's just great. And then I guess you just approached Darren out of the blue because you wanted to do a Cooper episode for your podcast.
We had been really doing what we do. Again, for people who don't know who I am, we did, there you go, there's a few of them. We did nothing but Earhart. So on the left, Vanished has been very intimately associated with Amelia Earhart. And we did a 16 episode season 1. Some of those episodes are, 4 or 5 hours long, very deep dives. And that's sort of what we've become known for the show. And when season 2 came around, we knew we had some marquee names and some marquee cases we wanted to do. I mean, how do you follow up Amelia Earhart? I know I'm in a Cooper room right now, but Earhart to me I'm an Earhart guy first and foremost. Earhart is the holy grail as far as I'm concerned. And, but how do you follow that up? We've always prided ourselves as a unit, as a co-host, myself and Jen, in doing shows and doing cases that aren't very well known. Amy Johnson, Judge Joe Crater, dead center of your screen, who I think we're going to release part 3 of that tonight or tomorrow night. And then you have the really big ones, like John Wilkes Booth, like Jack the Ripper, like DB Cooper. And I had reached out to Darren initially, and I'm going to fry myself here, but I think he wouldn't let me live it down if I didn't say it. We were not going to go the direction we were going to go originally for this Cooper thing. Originally, we were going to rehash and redo another Robert Rackstraw. Shows my ignorance. I didn't really know a whole lot about the case other than just outside stuff. I've seen some documentaries, heard some podcasts. Of course, I've been very familiar with Darren's show. And I reached out to Darren and I talked to him about it. I said, I'd love you to come aboard and be our guide. And he was very kind and he was very open to that. And then I gave him my idea and he didn't like it one bit. He said, look, Rackstraw has been done so many times, why don't you rethink this? And so I decided to sort of take a little bit of a break, come back about a week later. And I said, look, who do you think should have the spotlight shown on them? Who is, in your opinion, a dark horse in this case? And without hesitation, he said the name Ted B. Braden. And I thought, okay, let's look at Braden. I said, well, who is, I had been familiar with, your episodes of the show, but I said, who is the guy? If you were going to do an all Braden piece and an investigative piece, who would you talk to? And of course, he mentioned you. And so I reached out to you. And of course, to your credit, you were very open and generous with your.
I was flattered. I mean, it would be the first one that comes to mind because.
Yeah, you were great.
You're a smart guy, and you're like real serious about it. And I was flattered when you reached out.
Yeah,
like, this is great. And the fact that Darren recommended me to you, and I mean, you're good friends with Brad Meltzer, who did a show called Decoded, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of his, and of course, that's about Kenny Christensen.
It's a great
show.
It
And I mean,
is.
you might have had some pressure there because he's a friend of yours. And then I know you're
Yeah.
friends with Mark Zaid, who was part of the Rackstraw team.
Right.
With Thomas Colbert.
Right.
Got a lot of this stuff. And that's the greatest thing those guys did was get some of that stuff released from Freedom of Information Act, by the way.
Yeah.
Which is so big. But for you to just come out of, nowhere and daring to tell you about it, man, that was a massive honor for me personally.
Yeah. Well, hey, the honor is mine. We wanted to dive into something that hadn't really been looked at under a microscope. That was really important to me. Yes, I know that Braden's been looked at as a suspect. Yes, I know he's been in the vortex for a little while. But we thought, instead of rehashing Rackstraw, McCoy, Christensen, some of the people that are going to get those documentaries and going to get those projects anyway, I thought it's about time to maybe shift that spotlight and get over to somebody who maybe hasn't gotten the documentary treatment or really hasn't gotten the spotlight shown on them. And once I started talking to you, I remember we had about an hour-long conversation initially, and I remember Darren telling me, look, talk to this guy off the record, and I can promise you after that first conversation, you're going to be interested. It's going to pique your interest, and you're going to think he's on to something. And it was exactly that. I looked at what you had done. I read your book, of course, and looked at the case for Braden and talked to you about potential updates, and we were all in. It was off to the races from there. And I remember reaching out to, you mentioned people like Mark Zaid. I had worked with Mark Zaid previously on John Wilkes Booth, and he was a sweetheart. The guy is, for those who don't know, is an icon in historical mystery cases. There's not a case this man hasn't touched, and he happened to be very intimately involved with the D.B. Cooper case and, Robert Rackstraw in particular. And it's just every time we talk to somebody and every time we ask somebody to come aboard, Eric Eulis, Tom Kay, all these different people that are in the book, it just sort of worked out and everybody said yes. And I think it's really to the credit of the reputation of the show that we've built, and the hard work that we've put out there. We really do try to give everybody a fair shake. When you listen to me on the show, I'm never going to disagree with anybody when they're talking about a certain suspect, even if it's not a suspect that I particularly believe in. I give them the floor. That's what we do in this book, because it's not my job to really convince the reader or the listener, depending on how you're consuming this. It's my job to sort of get out of the way, ask the questions, and let the experts, let people like you sort of convince the reader. That's what Trial by Jury is about. That's what Vanished has always stood for. And the question we've always asked is, what evidence will convince you? If you're sitting in a jury box, and in this book, it's the same thing. I push aggressively hard for Ted B. Braden in his favor. The question you're going to have to answer is, was he responsible for the skyjacking on Thanksgiving Eve, or was he not? And I think that between what you say and the interview, the fantastic interview that we got, courtesy of you, of course, from Hank Birch, who stepped into the spotlight for the first time.
It's just such I'm so happy that's documented. Not now just in this new book, but
right.
In audio.
Right. Yeah, it's there. And Hank was again a sweetheart, gave me a lot of time. We talked for a lengthy amount of time, and he walked me through the entirety of the story. And when you talk about Hank and you talk about people that were connected to Braden, that had, interactions with him, it really does start to shift sort of the idea that this guy, even having removed Thanksgiving Eve from his resume, if you took that off his resume, this guy's career is remarkable. And this list of people like the McCoys and the Rackstraws and everybody else, I mean, there's 1,000 of them that you can list. They all have fantastic careers in and of themselves. But then you get to somebody like Ted B. Braden, and it's really on another level. It's like taking their careers and dialing up to 11. And that is before Thanksgiving Eve. So when you take all of that into consideration and you look at Thanksgiving Eve and you look at everything that's been put out and you look at Braden's career, you start to think something is wrong here. Something is not right about this. And so I looked at that and I looked at everything you did, and it really became legitimate in my eyes. It became a situation where this guy should be looked at under a microscope. And what I loved about what we did in the book is that we came at all of the potential negatives head on. And we said, okay, there's an issue with his height. Well, let's talk about that. And we talked about that with not only you, but a couple of different people in the book. And there's really amazing little anecdotes that are kind of sprinkled throughout the book here and there before you even step into it, that really sort of beef up your testimony and your work without you even having to try, which is really amazing. And so that's kind of why I'm so proud of this book, is that we got to shine the spotlight, on a guy who I think is very compelling for the DB Cooper, candidacy. And, do we convince people? I guess we'll find out. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see the feedback and to see, okay, well, what about this? And what about this? Because readers of the Vortex and people that are involved in it, obviously they're very knowledgeable. And so I say, bring it, because I would love to see what people have to say against Braden, other than what we sort of argue against in the book. And I'm happy to hear arguments about it, maybe why he doesn't fit or why he maybe does fit. It's just a little bit more spice to sort of throw into, into the ring with this Cooper Vortex thing and everything that's going on within it. It's never a dull moment. And this book is, I think, going to prove it, not just for Braden, but just for the case in general.
Yeah. And I know the piece that I wrote for the book, I laid it all on the kitchen table. Up till the point that I sent it to you, it was all on the table. Like everything, well, actually not everything, but 95%, a lot of it, just came hard with it, because I like that about you. You're like, hey man, just like make them prove it isn't, I love it.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
Hey, we got DNA. We got DNA,
Yeah.
Let's get it. Let's grab a letter. I got DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. That's here. Look, this is really what it comes down to. Cooper is a case that obviously is very, very big, and people are still very interested in it. And I think if the news that Eric Eulis just dropped and all these documentaries that are coming out and all these things that are happening doesn't prove that to you, then you really need to sort of take a closer look at it, because this is a case that people really intimately care about. Yeah, there's Braden. If you look at some of these images, I was very interested to not just comparatively look at an image and say, well, that's Cooper because he looks like him. Okay, a lot of people look like him. We really go over the top in the book to talk about why this guy was able to pull this off. It's because he was an everyman. Like we talk about in the book, you could have walked by this guy 1,000 times in an airport and not even think twice. And that's kind of the point. So you have to look at other things besides the physicality of it all, right? And besides, like, whether he's got blue eyes or whether his hair is slicked to the side, or whether he's got dimples or whether he's got a gobble neck or how tall is he, that's all important. Don't get me wrong. But I started looking at the backstory as you were laying it out. And then you started feeding me images like the one in the top right corner with the sunglasses on. And then of course the one in the bottom right where he's much older, than he was obviously in the top right when he was in the military.
And darker.
So, the whole swarthy term and that whole idea. I mean, we really go to the line and try to break down what these things mean. Why are the sketches maybe, and, not necessarily something you should hang your hat on 1,000%. Can sketches be askew? Can eyewitness testimony be askew? I'm here to tell you that, we dealt with eyewitness testimony ad nauseum for the Earhart case and Japanese capture, and the idea that Earhart and Noonan were captured by the Japanese and all these eyewitnesses from around the Marshall Islands and all of that. Eyewitness testimony can absolutely go askew. And so we wanted to look at more than just physicality, what this guy looked like or whatever. And so that's why we really backtracked into this guy's military career, into his demeanor, into his physicality, into his skill set. We talked about his ability to jump and how good a jumper this guy was. I had people like Dr. Bob Edwards and people like that were in the book that were just talking about, why Cooper chose a specific parachute and why he would have picked that. Darren says something in the book that's really sent chills down my spine in a way, because we were neck deep in Braden at the time. And he says something, I'm going to paraphrase here, but he says, Cooper sends Tina Mucklow at the very end, right before he jumps, he sends her to the cockpit to get with the rest of the crew and to kind of get out of the way. And Tina turns around and she looks at Cooper putting on the parachute. And she says it looked like he'd done that many times before. This is a guy that was intimately comfortable with this kind of a situation. And yes, you look at Rackstraw, and yes, you look at McCoy and a lot of these other people, and they were, they had the abilities, they had some skill set, and they had all this stuff. But Braden is like something else entirely. And I felt like not only would this jump have been, doable, but it would have been easy. And that's not my quote. That's other people in the book that are saying it before we even get to you. So I think it's really sort of an interesting scenario. It's an interesting suspect. I think after this book releases and people are able to consume it, you're going to have to deal with what we've put forward here, because this guy is like the elephant in the room that nobody mentions, or everybody's scared to mention on a major documentary or a major project like that.
And the alphabet guys still don't like that name being spoken.
Right. Yeah. And you look at the people who pushed this guy, who believed in this guy, like John Plaster, Billy all these people that you talk about, and I won't spoil too much of it. I want people to read it and to listen to your comment, or to read your commentary and read what you talk about in the book, because this is stuff that, you look at these guys, everybody in the McVie Sogs, everybody around this guy, when they mention DB Cooper, it's gotta be Ted Braden. There's no second place. Yeah. There's no other guy.
This plays right into what you're saying right now. And this is new. This one's not in the book because it came a little later. And Chris, you know about this one. And I'm going to put it up just real quick because this is what you're talking about. This is a picture of Vietnam from a gentleman named Leonard W. Tilley. This guy was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross as a McVie Sog in Vietnam. It was just, from what I heard from Bud Gibson, he probably should have gotten the Medal of Honor for what he did. He fought off an entire company of NVA in Vietnam. I mean, charging at him while his guys were wounded. It was crazy. Just one of these things you see at the movie. I mean, the bravery this guy displayed was insane. This is the type of guy that this is just not some armchair dude. This is a heavy combat veteran. And this is the quote that he told Bud Gibson down here at the bottom. "I would bet my life, my Distinguished Service Cross, and home that Ted Braden was DB Cooper." That is a quote from a guy that won the Distinguished Service Cross. I mean, that's stunning.
Right.
That's stunning.
And these guys,
Distinguished Service Cross.
Yeah, these guys, they don't, you don't read a statement like that and not, as the person who's reading it, not believe that this guy believed that Braden and Cooper were one and the same. And that's only one. So you start looking at all these people around him.
Hundreds.
Right.
I mean, literally hundreds.
Right. So I'm over here and I'm consuming all of this. I'm listening to you and I'm listening to all of our commentary and all the people that are talking to us. And it's really starting to get me to the point where, like, why is nobody looking at this guy aggressively? And I love sort of how we leave it. And again, I won't spoil it, but I love how we leave it. We really do, put the ball in everybody else's court. If this is wrong, falsify it. Falsify this hypothesis as we've put it forward. And, hey, if we're wrong, we're wrong. What I really love about, to sort of talk a little bit about your work ethic and what you've done is, you remind me a lot of, there's a gentleman by the name of Bill Snavely who works Project Blue Angel for Buka, for Amelia Earhart. And, he's got this aircraft wreckage and nobody's paying attention to it. And this aircraft wreckage he's been looking at for 14 years, it's been screaming at the top of its lungs for someone to go out there and properly investigate it, right? Bill has got everything he needs to come to a conclusion, a finality, as to whether or not he's got a plane or he's got the plane. But he needs, assistance to kind of get out there and to finalize it, the proper equipment, all that stuff. We won't get too far into it. But you have taken the idea of Braden as Cooper and you've moved it along, from point A all the way to point Z, basically. And you've gotten the DNA, you've taken the steps forward that you need to take. And you just want your answer. And Bill Snavely just wants his answer. And I think the way you solve cases like this, I've said it a million times, but it's true. You don't sit in a corner and try to point your finger at other people and say, everybody else is wrong, I've got the guy. What you do is you you don't stand in the corner, but you step out front and you say, hey, let's try to eliminate this guy or this suspect or this theory or whatever it is. And the real honest, true researchers will say, hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but let's try to prove this. Let's try to rule this guy out or rule him in. And I feel like everybody's dancing around this idea that Cooper and Braden, we're not the same guy or whatever the case is. Okay, so we put this forward. Let's prove it. Prove to me that this guy is not Cooper. If this guy's not Cooper, fine. That's not a problem. But you're going to be hard pressed to find anybody else in the vortex or on this suspect list whose career and whose skill set is better than Braden. And I will argue that with anybody. I know there's some great ones on there. Don't get me wrong. But Braden there's a great quote in the book. Hank says it. There's good, great, elite, and then there's Ted B. Braden. And I feel like somebody that would step aboard this aircraft on Thanksgiving Eve and do what Cooper did, it really fits this guy's demeanor. It fits this guy's ability, and it fits this guy's attitude. And I feel like with the DNA in play and everything else, you have to deal with this. And so, that's really sort of the whole plot of the book is going through this vortex, going through this case, walking through all these suspects, hearing these Richard McCoy's story is ridiculously insane. It's ridiculously insane. When I heard Darren tell me that story for the first time, I mean, people that are in this chat obviously probably know all these suspects backwards and frontwards even better than me. But when I heard that story of McCoy's for the first time, and I heard Robert Rackstraw's story, Barb Dayton's story, for God's sake, I mean, just these incredible stories, right? And maybe that's the rub, right? Maybe that's what's so amazing is this whole DB Cooper story is exposing so many people's incredible lives and careers. Any one of them could be DB Cooper, certainly. And that's we make that case before we step into the Braden territory and start, sort of shining that spotlight. But all of these people are fantastic people. They have fantastic careers. They've done amazing things. I couldn't believe McCoy's story the first time I heard it. And it's probably my favorite story ever in the Cooper case. But, we don't know. I mean, he's had so much, put on him. He's been the star of the show so many times. And I feel like, it hasn't really been proven yet definitively. So now let's take a look at some of these other guys. And Braden is that's why we named it a dark horse. He is the epitome of a dark horse suspect. He's one of those people that's hiding in plain sight and nobody's looking at it. Nobody's aggressively researching it except for you. And so that's why, we look at this. And what I'm loving seeing that Braden is getting a lot more attention now. I feel like, and I might be biased. I might be biased.
Huge part of that.
Well, he's white hot. He's white hot right now. And I think,
right now he's white hot. Yeah, he is.
Suspects come and go. They get hot. They get cold. That's the nature of that's the nature of this game. It was no different than the Earhart case, Jack the Ripper, all this different stuff with all these different theories. Zodiac, which you and I are getting ready to step into collectively.
Really, that's incredible.
So yeah, it's one of those scenarios where this guy is really, remarkable, and he should be looked at. And I'm glad that we're able to provide a look, maybe a second look, maybe a third look for people who have maybe dismissed him already because maybe he's a little too short. We come at that stuff head on. We do not hide from it.
That's one thing Darren always gave me credit for. I'd say here's the negatives. A little shorter than witness descriptions. His eyes are hazel; they're not brown like Lawrence Schaffner said. So here are the negatives right up front. And if those are a turn off for you, and you're a bigger believer in this or that, and that's fine. I mean, we'll stay friends. But if you're still staying around, let me give you the good stuff now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do that with suspects. Dan Greider didn't do it with Richard Floyd McCoy. There's a lot of negatives about McCoy, and McCoy's got some huge proponents out there. They come at me all the time. And I give them credit for it. They're big believers in it, but they never, say, hey, well, I do understand that the entire flight crew looked at photos of him not long after the McCoy skyjacking, and they all said it wasn't him. So they start scrambling for excuses. Cooper was middle-aged. McCoy was 28 at the time. I mean, he looked a little older for his age, but in concept, I think a young Tina Mucklow being that close in age to him would have, at least in terms of concepts and things that are being talked about, would have picked it up. He had a North
Yeah.
Carolina accent, and yes, he had a North Carolina accent at the time of the Cooper skyjacking. It's
Yeah.
proven.
Right.
And she said he didn't have an accent, sounded Midwest.
Right.
So they
Right.
at least acknowledge your suspect's negative.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Tina, and you mentioned the flight crew, and sort of them dismissing suspects based off their eyewitness testimony. And I wanted to sort of address that for a moment, because eyewitness testimony, as we talked about a little bit earlier, it's difficult. I mean, Mark Zaid in the book says it. I think there's a quote in the book where he talks about he doesn't really put a lot of faith in eyewitness testimony because it can get so twisted sometimes. I don't want to quote him directly, but it's in the book. People can read it. And I agree with that. And I'll give you a concrete example. I was on a flight, a 5-hour flight, ironically, from Florida to Los Angeles, just a few weeks ago. And I'm sitting on the flight, and there's a young woman who's sitting next to me, and for the duration of the flight. And all I could tell you is that this woman was blonde. She had kind of like long blonde hair, but she had a hoodie over her. She had her earbuds in, and she was on her phone or whatever. And we never looked each other in the eye. So we never made eye contact. I never got up to go to the restroom or anything. So we never crossed over each other. None of that stuff. I sat next to this woman for 5 hours. I could tell you she was maybe young to maybe middle-aged. I don't know, because all I saw was her hair. She didn't have any like silver or gray in her hair or anything. So I imagine she was probably younger. But if you put her in a photo array of 5 or 10 similar looking women, I would tell you that I would bet my house and everything I own that if my life depended on it, I could not tell you who that woman was. And it's very interesting because you have Tina Mucklow sitting next to Cooper. He didn't have a hoodie on or anything, but he had sunglasses on. And so that does skew a little bit of the stuff.
That's a disguise.
It's a disguise. He's in a suit, right? He's sitting down. We talk about, Dave Futterman makes an excellent point in the book. He talks about everybody making such a big deal out of the height. Well, Cooper was sitting down, and he talks a lot about having to be able to judge somebody's height when they're standing up fully as opposed to sitting down. Can you do that? Maybe. It's kind of tough.
Difficult to judge height sitting down.
But will you nail it to a T? Probably not. So the whole idea of him being, somewhere between, let's say 5'10" and 6'1", just to throw numbers out. Well, if there's somebody that's a suspect that fits everything else, but he's like an inch and a half shorter, to dismiss him based off of that, I think is sort of, it's difficult to do. And then you have, and that's before you get to 50 years later.
Bill Mitchell, the most relaxed witness to D.B. Cooper. Bill Mitchell did not know the plane was being hijacked. He sat right adjacent to D.B. Cooper, said 5'9", 5'10".
Right.
Remembered him spilling a drink. No one even remembered that. So one off.
Yeah.
Bill Mitchell, 5'9".
Yeah. I mean, there you go. So people will have different descriptions. It's tough to base height. And then that's before you get to 50 years later, when, if you're showing somebody, a suspect that's from 50 years ago, granted, this thing was probably pretty traumatizing to both Florence and to Tina, fully granted that. But 50 years later is an awfully long time. Mark Zaid says something in the book that's really great. When's the last time you sat on an airplane? When's the last time you sat in a fast food restaurant? Could you positively identify the person sitting next to you? Of course you can't. Why would you ever pay any attention to the details? Why would you ever look at things like that? And then you add 50 years plus later to that. It's very difficult. Now, I know
speaking of Bill Mitchell, he freely admits, like, you could show him, you could have, let's just say we have a photograph of who we've 100% know now that it's D.B. Cooper, whoever that is. You could put that in front of Bill Mitchell, and he's not going to remember. He tells you that. He says it to this day. I just cannot remember after all these years what he looked like. Yeah,
it's tough. It's really tough. And so people, get to the point where they, are just sort of spitting out things. And, hey, could this be Cooper? Well, the problem is they all do look like the sketch, pretty good.
Look at William Zodiac. It's like, you'll see that in Zodiac. Everybody every white Caucasian male that wore glasses and a crew cut looks like Zodiac. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, look at William J. Smith, another standout. I mean, Dave Futterman does a fantastic job. He looks like the sketch. Striking. He looks like if we're basing this on a sketch, it's game over there. Well, I mean, it's dead on. So we really try. We spend a lot of time in the book and in this journey we take really not trying to dismiss the sketches, but really trying to sort of call that into view. So people can look at these sketches and be like, well, these sketches, they're really taken as absolute gospel truth. And, when we talk to everybody in the book, I talked to Nikki B about this in the book, and Nikki makes some great stuff too. Nikki B, shout out to him. He's fantastic in the book. And he has a really great quote leading into Braden and leading into our trial by jury segment of the book. And Nikki does probably some of the greatest work in the Vortex on this whole thing. And we talk to him about it. He gives really great insight into it. The sketches themselves, can we base it wholly on those sketches? Can you take those original sketches and can you say, this is who we're looking at, and anything that deviates from that sketch in any way, shape, or form is an automatic dismissal? I don't know about that. If I'm sitting in a jury box and this is a 50-year-old case, granted the sketches, were fairly fresh at the time when they made them, I feel like, well, a lot has transpired in the time since then. And if this guy did hit the ground and survive and live out, let's say, and if he's Braden, and Braden died in 2007 or 9, I forget.
7.
Okay, so
7.
And you mentioned in the book, which is kind of sad. You don't even know where his ashes were scattered. We don't even know where he was.
I couldn't even prove that he is dead. I mean, there is I think a Social Security death index maybe, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to look at that and be like, okay, this is really, this sketch is it. The sketches, we really call them in, Tessa D'Amico makes a really great, couple of great, really fantastic points on the sketches themselves and kind of how that works. Everybody kind of chimes in on the sketches, and I kind of keep coming back to those in the book for a reason, is because when we get to Braden and we get to some of these other suspects that we talk about, well, they're maybe not, they don't maybe have all the similarities with the sketches, but there's all these other things that really add up. And I'm trying to get people to shift over to some of these other things and look at the sketches, not necessarily as secondary, but just sort of stop making those gospel and look at some of these other things and then come to the sketches and be like, okay, how many similarities does this guy have? Does he have the big ears? Does he have the swarthy skin? How was his hair at the time? The list goes on and on, the eye color, hair color, height, all that stuff. So I feel like what we do in this book and in that original series was, we try to spotlight all of those things and then introduce Braden. Okay, let's forget about the sketches for a minute. Let's pretend they don't exist. Let's look at this guy's career. Let's look at what this guy could do. Let's look at his temperament. Let's look at his skill set.
If you had to pick a suspect, if people would have to admit, no matter who you like as Cooper or whatever, if you had to pick of all the known suspects to pull this heist off again, and you got to keep the money, who are you going to go with?
Yeah. Honestly. And Braden had, talking to Hank, and Hank talking about, Jack Singlob and, just all of that connection, and Braden potentially having CIA, he did have CIA ties, but Cooper having CIA ties, potentially somebody over the FBI or over that jurisdiction. This would have been the guy. Of all of them, this would have been the guy. And the idea, when, I talked to Nikki B and he talks about that 302 and he talks about all the stuff that Mark Zaid helped get released, and the Lake Elsinore suspect and the Lyle Cameron senior stuff. I mean, I won't go into a lot of detail if you haven't heard about it, but you'll read about it there. All this stuff seems to add up. This is a guy, Braden was a guy that did the work. He did the recon. He did the homework. Not only did he have the skill sets and the temperament and all the stuff I've been BSing about all night, but he did the homework. And so this is a guy who would have maybe searched out someone like Lyle Cameron Sr., maybe would have done the homework about drop zones in the Pacific Northwest, maybe would have done the recon, so that when he stepped aboard Flight 305, maybe he wasn't, maybe it wasn't on a whim. Maybe this was planned out for a very long time.
No, I want to jump in here real quick because I promise somebody earlier I'd do it, because Ross had a show earlier with Darren Schaefer on Planet X Films. And if you guys haven't watched that yet, go over to Ross's channel, Planet X Films. But we were talking about, the thing that started for me with DB Cooper, of course, was In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
And in that, he's talking about these reports around La Center, Washington, or near the drop zone, around Ariel and the farmlands around La Center. of all these people that lived there saying there was a low-flying plane in the week preceding the Cooper skyjacking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that I thought about recently, because I know Darren talks about like, yeah, I want to know who Cooper was, but what I really want to know is what happened when his boots hit the ground. You hear Darren say that a lot, and this is pure speculation on my point. At this point, but I'm going back to Leonard Tilley here, who said that about, he said he bet his life that Ted Braden was Cooper.
Right.
Well, Leonard Tilley was the 1-0. That's a Max VSOG term for a team leader. There were 7-man teams that went to Laos and Vietnam. His 1-1, which is assistant team lead, was a guy named Richard Earl Jenkins. And Richard Earl Jenkins lived in Richland, Washington, just outside of Vancouver. I mean, he literally lived on the edge of like the center at the time of the skyjacking. This guy knew Braden well, and he had a small plane that he was flying at the time. Here's a guy that Braden knew, and if Braden needed to do some recon by air, here, your man was Richard Jenkins, his old Mac VSOG pal. So here you have Leonard Tilley, who obviously knew him well because Jenkins was Tilley's 1-1 and Mac VSOG, so he knew Jenkins intimately. So there's another connection. Braden had a SOG buddy that lived near the drop zone that had a small plane. That's a fact. That's speculation on my part, but it's one of the things that he would have done. And if these guys are in combat together, you can trust them.
Well, yeah, and them stepping into combat. What you talk about in the book about Braden's background, again, before we even approach Thanksgiving Eve, is really amazing. Some of the missions he was involved in, some of the covert ops he was doing, really top of the mark stuff and really top secret stuff, jumping into Laos and jumping into all these different places. And, that when you told me about, them basically killing their own guys from the air because they didn't want them to get caught and get that, this is stuff, you look at this kind of stuff and you look at his career and you think a skyjacking like this is going to bother or rattle a cage of this kind of a guy?
He wouldn't have been nervous. Richard Floyd McCoy is a great example. Richard McCoy was a brave guy. I think he got a Distinguished Flying Cross for an action he did in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot. He was in Special Forces for about 5 months, but then he becomes like a regular helicopter pilot because that was his best skill, was flying a helicopter, and he was good at it. Of course, Robert Rackstraw was a helicopter pilot. Rackstraw was never Special Forces, by the way, but McCoy was a Green Beret for a while. But then he was so good at flying the helicopter. But McCoy was a nervous wreck during his hijacking. That's why I could never accept him as being D.B. Cooper. Because if McCoy was D.B. Cooper, then all the witnesses got that wrong. Forget about the sketches and the turkey neck and everything. Cooper, all counts were that he was calm. He got a little agitated during the refueling, but he was calm. Richard McCoy was a nervous wreck. He called attention to himself. He had makeup coming down. He left the hijack instructions in the waiting area, and the guy had to bring it on. Did anyone leave this in the waiting? I mean, that would, if the guy only looked in that envelope, I don't know if anything was written on it. His
game over.
Thing's over right there. He was a nervous wreck. Everything he did when he hit the ground was wrong. But I mean, this is a guy that in Vietnam was very brave. Richard McCoy was brave. But he was still nervous pulling this off. But Cooper wasn't. That's one in a million.
Right. Yeah. And
Braden was known to be calm under fire. Braden was known to be, I mean, in combat, he was just never rattled.
Yeah. You have to look at that. You have to take that into heavy consideration. And when you step into Hank Birch's testimony and you talk about him being, in Fort Dix, under custody in Fort Dix, and just the way he had all of these special perks and his attitude, and him just telling Hank, hey, don't worry about this, sir. It's going to be taken care of. It's all going to work out. This is a guy who didn't rattle, who didn't get scared, who didn't get nervous. These kind of people, this is a guy who served in multiple wars at the end of World War II, and he served through Vietnam and became a commando. And he's the guy who put ads for himself in Ramparts magazine. And,
to be a mercenary.
This is a guy who knew his own skill set. He knew what he was capable of. There's a level of confidence there. Javier Leyva talks about it in the book. Con man comes from confidence man. This is a guy who had an extreme amount of confidence in himself and his abilities. And at the end of the day, that's what got him through. You mentioned McCoy, making that, being a nervous wreck, but at the end of the day, he succeeded. He made the jump.
Succeed. He made it to the ground with the money.
So you look at someone like that, and then you step back and look at Braden's career and what he was able to do and the jumps he was able to make. Some people call him psychotic, and some people call him a genius. And I think maybe there's a little bit of it. There's a mixture of both there. This is a guy who, just didn't rattle at all. I mean, I can't overstate that enough. And the one thing you would have to have, the one aspect of your mentality that you would have to have complete mastery over, is the ability to stay calm in this situation. And this guy didn't flinch. Cooper didn't flinch. The similarities are there. And, we don't know. I mean, was he Cooper? I don't know. But I can tell you right now that this is a guy, like I said before, that you've got to deal with before you can sort of just dismiss him and throw him on the pile of suspects that are like, oh, he's an inch and a half too short, he's out. Well, I'm here to tell you that you got to look at everything else. And you got to look at all this testimony that we have in this book from not only you and not only from Hank, but from Dave Futterman and from all these different people, these fantastic people that are in the book. Eric Eulis makes a really great point about dismissing suspects and his ability to work with Sheridan Peterson and have to dismiss that based off of, the idea of, the whole smoking idea. Was he a smoker? Was he a non-smoker? Well, you have to dismiss off of that. Well, we know that Braden was a smoker. We know he was a drinker. We know that he fit the description pretty close. I know we've been talking about, the sketches and stuff a lot tonight, but I'm looking at everything above and beyond that. And then you tack all that other stuff on, and it starts to become very compelling. And I think, that's to your credit, what you've done in this book, the work you put forth, the testimony you give, and combined with Hank's testimony is stunning. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And then, you keep drilling down on all this stuff, reaching out to people that knew Braden or knew of Braden, and you're getting these fantastic quotes and all this support. And you have the DNA, and you're taking these steps. I think that you have really performed a really fantastic investigation of your suspect. And I think that's commendable.
Oh, I appreciate
it. That's why I wanted to do this.
Fuel. You were a big part of the fuel. I remember when we were going to work together on it, you were saying, are you ready to find out if he isn't DB Cooper? And I was like, I don't know. But and I was like, you're right. I love that attitude. Like, get it, rip the Band-Aid off.
That was my question. And that's the single question that made me decide to go all in on Braden and really, really try this out is your answer to that question. Cause that was a question I asked. I was like, look, are you sure? Are you really sure that if you go down this road, you might not like what you find? Are you sure this is what you want? And let's do it. And that is, again, that's commendable. It's like Snavely with Project Blue Angel. It's like so many other people that I've been able to work with over the years on different cases. John and Christine with Jack the Ripper and Montague John Druitt, and, Nate Orlowick with John Wilkes Booth and the whole idea that he maybe survived that night and didn't die in that barn, in Garrett's barn. There's all kinds of, amazing stories. And that's where this all starts. It's a hell of a story. And I think that's the first question I ask you before you even name Braden in the book. I tell you, everybody's focusing on Thanksgiving Eve. Well, what I want to know is what happened leading up to Thanksgiving Eve. And if what you're saying is true, then this guy, DB Cooper, had one hell of a beginning. And that's always been my position. This is a guy who exists for about 5 hours. He has no beginning and he has no ending. And it's amazing. You look at somebody like Earhart, the most photographed and videographed woman on the face of the earth, arguably the most famous person on the planet when she disappears. Think of the most famous person in the world right now, just vanishing off the face of the earth. Well, that was Earhart at the time. This guy is something else entirely. He's a complete ghost. And there's a really great line in the book. I will pat myself on the back for this one because I say the line, but it's true because, everybody in the vortex has been chasing a ghost for 51 years. And I know something about that because I have been chasing Earhart for 20 plus years, on my own, with my own stuff over there. And so I know how that feels. I know what it feels like to invest everything into one thing and to maybe be wrong or to maybe have to
Yeah, it's a
backtrack.
huge investment, and it makes it hard to abandon something. Like when you find something like I guess Euless did with Peterson and was a non-smoker, and like now I'm convinced that DB Cooper had to be a smoker. So you got to realize it when it comes up. But
Hey, you know what? Eric is, look, shout out to Eric Euless. I know he's involved in it heavier than anybody else probably right now. He's out there in the field. He's out, the press conference, that he just had with the new suspect. What he said and what he was able to do on that show and in this book is something I've never experienced before. He was able to say, look, I was wrong. This is why I believe Peterson was it. I put everything I had into it. He was on TV, on marquee shows talking about it. He believed like he believed it was Peterson, and he had to dismiss based off of hard evidence. That is hands down remarkable and admirable. And, I tip my hat to Eric Euless and to people like Tom Kay and to people like Mark Zaid and to people like all these guests that we have in the book. I can't overstate that enough. You take all these people out of the book, we've got nothing here. You take Braden out of the book and your fantastic work, we've got nothing here. So really this book and this story is my, it's an overstated thing, but it's true. Like it's my love letter to the Cooper Vortex. What Darren's done with everything he's done with that podcast. He's a kindred spirit to me with Earhart and Cooper. We sort of did the same thing. We sort of came up around the same time, going the same route. And, to have all of these fantastic people step into this book and allow me to step into their case and into something that is so intimately close to them, that's the biggest honor here. And I hope that when people read this, I hope that, regardless if you think Braden is Cooper or not, regardless if you think I'm crazy, I don't, as long as you read this and you enjoy the ride, and you can look at this and be like, he wasn't Cooper. Oh, wow. He probably really was Cooper. Whatever you get out of this book, when you read it and when you go through and you finish up with Bruce's afterward,
oh God,
I feel
Bruce's
like
writing, Bruce, just to put more of Bruce's writing in printed copy is huge. He's just such a great writer. His Cooper writing, like in the Mountain News, is so awesome. But I just hope Bruce continues to write. He is such a gifted writer.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that prologue, man, I sent it to you, and it's just like it sets the entirety of the tone for the book, and you really realize that this is he manages to do in just a few paragraphs in a basic prologue something I couldn't do in an entire book. I mean, he summarizes the whole thing, and he summarizes just how deep this possibly could go. And he tips his hat to Braden, and I won't even call him our suspect, your suspect. He tips his hat to Braden in a very amazing, bone-chilling way in that prologue. And at the end, he wraps it up really beautifully. And I feel like, it's an honor. Like I said, Bruce is an icon. I wish I was able to have more conversations with him. I didn't get that chance. That's definitely my loss. But, Bruce is, to have him in this book, to have Eric and to have, Tom Kay and to have, all these Nikki B and all these people in the book, it's remarkable. It's really remarkable.
That's one of your greatest abilities. I mean, it's bringing these huge teams together, because I know Earhart and that huge group and those legends together, and I know some of those people probably didn't really agree, and you're kind of like the referee of all this. I mean, that's a lot of work, man, and probably a lot of stress, and you're masterful at it.
It's a lot of work, man. I appreciate that. I hope that's the legacy, and when we do these books and when we do these podcasts, we're getting ready to step into Zodiac. We're fired up for that. When we go through, that process, that's what we try to do. We try to leave it all out there, and we try to let the audience decide. We try to let the jury decide. You guys in this chat, people that read this book, you are the jury, and it's a fun sort of twist, and it's a fun presentation twist. But at the end of the day, that's what this is. We're trying to convince you of whatever it is we're talking about. When I do Earhart, if I'm pushing for Japanese capture, I'm going to push for that. If I'm pushing for Castaway, I'm going to push for that. And it's my push along with the presentation of all these people, that's really going to sell you or not sell you. And so, and Bree's talking about the Earhart crowds.
Yeah,
He's
I knew that
absolutely
about it. I
right.
know enough about Earhart that Bree knows what they're talking about.
It's toxic. It's toxic.
I
And
know that couldn't be easy.
what I love about it is you're starting to see that shift, though. We just brought Chasing Earhart back. We brought the first like 3 or 4 episodes, and we're doing like a very limited run of it. And I'm bringing back some of my favorite guests and a lot of brand new theory and a lot of new stuff. And that's been fun. I'm in a very different position now than I was 5 years ago with all this stuff when I first started out. But we have the benefit of having sort of a track record now. Now, whether that track record's good or bad, it's up to the listener to decide. But I feel like when we talk about these iconic characters like Amelia Earhart, D.B. Cooper, John Wilkes Booth, and we're able to use that platform to introduce people like Judge Joe Crater and Amy Johnson and Henry Avery and people you might not have known. That's what I love. And credit to Jen Taylor, who I had no idea about Judge Crater. That's a whole nother podcast, but I had no idea about that. And so, hey, it's Nikki B. He just popped into the chat. Shout out to Nikki B. I've been bragging about you, man.
Yeah,
tonight.
He was
so
lauding you big time, Nikki.
Yeah, he's again just another great.
Nikki's
just
a grinder, man.
Just a great guy.
He's an absolute grinder. Ryan's a grinder now.
Ryan's a grinder. Nikki's a grind. I mean, all these people are. Tessa. God, Tessa.
Oh, she's great. She's great. I know she's had a baby. I don't know if maybe the baby.
Yeah.
6 months, but
congratulations to Tessa. She's been amazing. She was amazing. She stepped into that podcast, into that book, and just absolutely killed it. And Nikki killed it. And I feel like these people, it's really great to have sort of like a lot of this younger guard, sort of taking the torch and kind of running with it,
these young
and
guys
doing all this stuff.
And what they're bringing new, a new suspect, is awesome. I mean, we're all friendly with it. I mean, I people with new suspects and stuff is great. I mean, that's one thing that I kind of feel like I lost having a suspect in the case, because I've always loved all things Cooper. And I loved when Galen Cook came on Coast to Coast with Gossett. I loved it. I thought, man, this Gossett guy is great. So
Gossett's another one.
I feel like I've given up a little bit having a suspect, because it's kind of more free to not have one in some ways, where you could just like, I love this guy and I want to work, So I try to get both but it's kind of hard, because we all want to, we're friendly competing here in some ways. But what's I always say this, and I know it's corny, but it's the people you meet, because I would have never met you or Nikki, Ryan, Bruce, so many great guys. I mean, that's just huge that you have similar interests with.
Right.
Gonzo, man, hey, Gonzo's always awesome. He's in D.B. Cooper. We shared our favorite movie is Rushmore. I mean, there's my Rushmore poster back there. Like me and Ronnie, you'd never know by seeing Ronnie, who's this awesome athlete jumping off his tattoos. You'd never think we have anything in common, but we have so much in common. So it's guys like Ronnie, Nikki, Darren. Darren's the center of everything, No, Darren's the captain. I mean, I say it in the book, I'll say it here publicly. He's the captain of the ship. He's a great one. He knows what he's doing. He's been able to to stay neutral. That's very that's very difficult to do in these cases. I have a very kindred relationship with Darren. And I feel like, I understand him. I think he understands me, and it's always a great conversation when him and I chat, whether it's on or off the record. And, I just, hey, look, this is not my case. I'm an Earhart guy, freely admit that. But, I've loved my journey into this case. I know it's, it can be tough sometimes. People disagree. It gets aggressive and it gets kind of nasty sometimes. But I can tell you, can only speak to my personal experience. Everybody, and this is not a stroke or anything like that, everybody has been really great. Everybody has been willing to share the knowledge. And if they're not willing to, they're very respectful. Hey, I politely decline. I can't do this. I'm sorry. Whatever. It's not, and I've no hard feelings. I've had people that couldn't do it or didn't want to do it, because we were pushing Braden maybe specifically or whatever the case is. Yeah,
that's totally fine.
There's no hard feelings at all,
Totally fine.
I got a good friend that has a completely different theory on Zodiac, a close friend that if I made enemies with early on, it would have blown a huge opportunity for me. A friend of mine, some people might could figure out who that is, who's got pretty much a different theory than I do on Zodiac. I've got a lot invested there.
Right.
But if I alienated him or tried to poke holes at him, it would have really
Yeah.
messed me up. But I'm not like that.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's okay to disagree on some things.
Yeah, that doesn't that doesn't help anybody, when it just gets nasty and all that. And I try to be respectful of everybody. I try to obviously respect the work, and again, everybody's been great. I was worried about a couple of people because they're giants. They don't have to talk to me. I'm a nobody to them. But luckily everybody was like, oh yeah, let's do it. We'll have an interview. And it worked out. And I remember when we did the book, I got to reach out to everybody again and say, hey, I'm going to do a book version of this. Is this okay? Nobody said no. Everybody's like, yeah, send me a copy. I love it. Everybody stands behind sort of, their presentation in the book and or in the original show and what they did. And we have a handful of folks that did 1-year retrospectives that are in the book, yourself included. I think Tessa's one of them that did it. I think Dave Futterman does a really great one in the book. So all these people that were taking part in it, just did so because I think they love the case. And anybody who comes in that has a new approach or something different, they really enjoy that. And yeah, we so push, we push Braden aggressively, in this book toward the back half of it. But I really encourage people that have not heard the show and want to get something extra and read this book to read the front half, obviously first. Some people do read. I did find out some people read the books backwards, which is kind of weird. They read like Trial by Jury first, that's and then they go back. So, however you want to consume it. But I feel like, before we get to Braden, there's at least 10 or 12 other suspects that we drop and we talk about why they're good, why they're maybe not so good. And, I think we try to be pretty fair about addressing the negatives on Braden, pushing the positives, and really trying to forcing the audience to look at this guy as a compelling candidate for the suspect of interest for the skyjacking on Thanksgiving Eve. Bob Edwards, Dr. Bob Edwards, shout out to Bob Edwards, who's been amazing. Did some great stuff in the book too. His book is amazing. He was kind enough to get me a copy and send it to me while I was researching and while I was doing the book and before I interviewed him. And he made for a fantastic interview and, just brought a lot of compassion to it and, just a really good analytical approach to it. And I think for people who are saying, well, what's the difference between the podcast or between this? I think when you consume it in the written form and you look at the presentation, you really do get something a little bit different out of it than if you just listen to it casually. And I also think that when you couple that with the retrospectives and you couple that with all the added stuff and Bruce Smith's fantastic work in it, I think you've got something that's really compelling to read. And I think it gives you a really good snapshot of the overall case. And
Cooper, a lot of people want all the books. I know, like Darren has this little bookshelf. I love it because he's got all the Cooper books, and it was just. It goes, you can't, you gotta have this one or it's not complete.
Yeah. And I'll answer a question because I was just kind of monitoring the chat. Scribble was asking about this book being self-published. It is self-published. Was working with a publisher before. I decided to go the self-publishing route. As far as advice, I would say, just get your ideas out. Get some really good beta readers. We had some fantastic beta readers. Mandy Horvath stepped into this. Bree did an amazing job on this with beta reading, correcting all of my ridiculous mistakes and my grammar and my stuff. I sent all of your stuff to you. Everybody who was in the book, I sent their sections to them specifically so they could say, hey, can you basically edit your own section, make sure I'm not taking anything out of context, all that stuff. So my advice would be get as many people involved in the editing process once you've got like a really rough draft done. I use Ingram Spark to do all my stuff, and they've been a joy to work with, and they put out some really great
the layout's
quality.
Great. I mean, the cover's beautiful.
Yeah, Josh Sloan did a great job.
Inside, it's just beautiful, pretty as the outside.
Yeah, and thank you again. Something to credit you as well. You provided a lot of the great imagery in the books. I think it's another piece of advice I would say is take whatever you learn from your first effort and put it into your second, and then do the same thing. As you go on. We really try to take some of the criticisms on the Earhart book. Like the book was 800 and plus pages, so we didn't put images in it. We didn't put references to documentation or anything like that in it. And my thought process at the time was, well, the entirety of the book as a reference, because the whole podcast you can just go to and all the show notes are there and all that. But this time we put imagery in the book. You know, a lot of the images you've had on screen today of Braden are in the book.
Yeah,
And
and
a lot of that
laid
stuff.
out. I mean, they're clear and
Yeah.
crisp, but
Yeah.
definitely better than mine. Because the way
exhibits.
they publish it for you, it looks so good. You gotta,
Yeah.
you want to own it. And the
It came
Kindle
out
version
good.
too. You want both. You want both
Well,
the Kindle and the paperback.
yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm so glad, and for me, I'm so happy that people, people like you and everybody who are in it, they've looked at it and they're happy with the layout. Because again, I mean, this is a tribute not only to the Cooper case, but to people like you and to people that have actually, worked on this case for a long time. So I want people to be proud of this book. If you participate in it, I want you to look back on it and be like, oh yeah, that was cool. I'm glad I did that.
And I know one of your goals is to get a copy or more that everybody signed. I mean, I definitely do it, and I'll ship it to Nikki or Darren.
We'll ship it around.
Yeah, because I know you. I mean, for you definitely to have all of the signatures in it would be such a nice keepsake.
That's what it's all about. Yeah, this is a group effort. My name's on the front. Darren's is on the bottom, rightfully so. He's but this is
Bruce. Would be a great one too.
yeah, Bruce would be great. This is absolutely a group effort. Without the guests, we don't have anything here. And I hope people enjoy it. I hope people have fun with it. I hope it sparks conversation. And if you think I'm crazy, feel free to email me. If you don't, if you really like it, if you think we're onto something, go do your own research. Get out there and start looking at Braden stuff. Get out there and start looking at, Sheridan Peterson or whoever you believe it is. Get out there and look at William J. Smith or, whatever it is. If I can inspire people to do that, mission accomplished here. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And so the link to the pre-order of the Kindle and the paperback is in the show notes. And I have another link in there because I saw this today. This is Tina Mucklow, and it's a recent picture of Tina Mucklow working. I think it's called the Lane Kitchen.
Yeah.
And she's volunteering, and these people bring food to people that can't go out and get food because they're incapacitated in wheelchairs and stuff like that. So I thought that was really awesome of Tina. To do that. So I actually put a link to that. That kitchen she's working for in the description as well, where people can make donations to it. I thought it was cool, but that's great to see Tina Mucklow out there. Volunteering like that, man. She is just awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole thing has been special, and I'm happy we're here. I'm happy it's out, or it's about to be out. I'm happy about that. We got about 10 days, 11 days out until it comes out, until it hits everywhere.
Yes. So if you pre-order, does it get? I guess if you pre-order the book,
so you can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that jazz, like if you want a signed copy. You can get it, if you want a signed copy, you can go to vanishedshow.com. And we just actually rebranded the site, and we've got a store on there.
I'll add that link.
Yeah, we have a store on there, and you could buy both. You could buy rabbit holes on there, and also Take the Money and Run is on there. And if you pick it up, it's pre-ordered. What I will tell you that is if you do pre-order directly from us, you're going to get a few extras in the book that you will not get on Amazon. Some really fun, cool stuff. The presentation's really different.
I'm glad you brought that up. Can you say anything about that yet, or is that come?
Yeah. Well, I will. I will actually.
If you don't want to, don't. But I've totally forgot about it.
No, that's totally fun. We have a really cool Easter egg that we're including in the book. This is not me. This is courtesy of Darren Schaefer. So I want to get that out front. Darren has sent me some coupons, some original Raleigh cigarette coupons that are really a really neat piece of history. And the first 50 people that pre-ordered, a couple of people have pre-ordered already. The first 50 people that pre-order it are going to get a Raleigh coupon in there. And I won't tell you the other thing, but I will tell you that the title, Take the Money and Run, you could take that literally. And so if you get the book directly from us, it'll not only will I sign it, of course, but you'll get a couple of fun, really neat presentation style extras and a little piece of history that's really cool that connects to Cooper through a really neat Easter egg. So yeah, I mean, you can get it through Vanished Show, or you can get it through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or online bookstores. Shout out to that. I mean, if you want to get it through your favorite online bookstore, it should be there right now. So that's where you can get it. And I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, man, fantastic. I'm really excited about it, and it's just an awesome awesome cover and the inside that the layout. I'm just really excited
Yeah,
about
man.
it.
Thank
This
you.
is
And I'm
an honor to have been involved with it.
Hey, it was great. Like I said, I wanted to kick this off with you. I mean, I look at this book as just as much yours as it is mine. You know, your research is obviously out front in this book, and it's really great. And you did a great job. So hats off to you. And I cannot wait to visit the West Coast and work with you on Zodiac and dive into that case. That's going to be a lot
That's
of
going to
fun.
be
So
big. I'm
yeah,
really excited about that, and I've already you've already shown me the outline for that, and
yeah,
I'm getting psyched up for it big
yeah.
time.
That's going to
It's
be
going to be
fun, man.
big. I mean, it's going to be big.
Yeah, and Jen is with us on this one. She couldn't, as you mentioned, she couldn't make Cooper the first one because she had a lot on her plate. But she is with us on this one, so we're gonna have some great cross-examination in this one. For Zodiac, it's gonna get down to the nitty-gritty. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and that's where we live and die in the show. It's really that's where we thrive the most. So I'm we're gonna keep going, as much as we can, as long as we can on all these cases. And I'm just honored. Great to kick this off with you.
Yeah, you too, man. And definitely we're gonna be in touch, and I can't wait. And then with the anniversary, it's gonna be available. So I'm just really excited about this book. And this
Yeah.
who knows? I think it's just gonna make everything bigger and bigger and all things Cooper because it's that time of the year.
It's that time of the year. It's Cooper time. Yeah, no, November 23rd. The book hits everywhere, and enjoy it, folks. And yeah. I mean, see you guys in the vortex. I'm always watching. I'm excited about this.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on, Chris. We're gonna do it again soon, hopefully. And obviously, we're doing another project together. So
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun, and I just can't wait for it to continue.
absolutely, man. Hey, thank you, Drew. I appreciate you, man. I know you're getting tight on your time. So you guys, thanks for being in the chat. Thanks for all the enthusiasm, the kind words. I'm reading them as I go, and I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. Appreciate it very much. So yeah.
Thanks, man. Have a good night, Chris.
All right. You guys have a great one. We'll see you soon.
All
All right.
right.
All right.
And Scribble, I did tell Scribble. I didn't tell Scribble. If y'all are still there, let me see. I've never done a share screen, so I was going to try to play Scribble's DB Cooper song, but it won't let me. Well, dude, I tried. Window. Can y'all see this screen? AVG secure browser. I tried to do it, Scribble. I was going to play your DB Cooper song, but anyway, if y'all haven't heard that, it's great. Scribble's DB Cooper song is great, and Bruce has a DB Cooper song somewhere on YouTube as well. I wanted to play that for Bruce, but I promise next time I'm going to figure out how to do the share screen because I'm still doing StreamYard. But thanks for tuning in, everybody, and again, thanks Chris for coming on. And the book link is there, and I'll also get that link if you want an autograph copy from Chris. So thanks everybody, and oh, you see me in the book cover. You see the little StreamYard thing? Let me try this real quick. I don't know if this will work.